Welcome to the Growth Buyer Podcast, where we engage with top business leaders who share their experiences and provide real insights that help them attract customers, retain staff, and grow their bottom line. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi there, my name is Kevin Horrigan, and I'm the host of the show, where I feature inspired business leaders from various backgrounds and industries who are willing to share their insights and experiences. Today's podcast is brought to you by Spinutech. Spinutech is a leading digital advertising agency with over 170 team members who span all aspects of digital, helping their clients attract new customers, accelerate growth from existing clients, and ultimately help those companies become more successful. Spinutech, thank you so much for your sponsorship today. Well, today's guest is Steve Wyatt. Steve is the Vice President of Marketing, Global Creative Director of Content at Kenneth Cole Productions, where he's been since 2003. Steve's responsibilities at Kenneth Cole's brand portfolio across all labels, product categories, and communications. In addition to serving Kenneth Cole, Steve and company have been proud supporters of the Mental Health Coalition, UN Free and Equal, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and Gifford.org. On a lighter note, Steve is also a published humor writer, and he's published 2 books titled Do More Don'ts and Humanity Breeds Profanity. Steve, welcome to the Growth Buyer Podcast.
Hi, thank you, Kevin, and thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We're super excited to dig in on lots of different things here today. So, Steve, you and I have got a chance to get to know each other, but I think our audience would like to know a little bit more about you. Maybe tell us where you grew up, maybe what you aspired to be when you did grow up, and maybe a little bit more about yourself.
Hi. So you can probably tell I'm from the UK. I grew up in a small village, actually, near a town called Maidenhead, which is not far from Windsor. I didn't have many hopes and dreams as a child. I didn't have any expectations. I just went with the flow. And I was always kind of a little mischievous. And I was always, I was a bit of a class clown, not the biggest class clown, kind of like the one making little comments at the back of the room. I studied hard. I've always studied hard. And then I went to Manchester University, and was actually the Metropolitan University, which is MMU. I studied advertising there, which was good for me because at first I thought I wanted to be in graphic design, and because I liked ideas, but my skill set wasn't as good as most graphic designers. So what happened was when I fell into the world of advertising, it was perfect for me because you could actually use your thinking and your strategy and also I'm definitely more a copywriter and a writer in general. So that was good for me. So it meant that I could also then work with people more talented than I am at their graphic design and the design part of it to bring those ideas to life rather than relying on my own weaknesses and shortcomings.
Well, and that's interesting. There are a couple of things. So one, you said you're a mild class clown. Is that maybe the foundation of where writing humor books has come from?
Yeah, definitely. I've always, you as you get older, you do start to analyze your own brain and start to think about why things happen. And I've always tried to see the humor in a situation, no matter how stressful it is. It's almost like a coping mechanism for me. Where I know that my brain, I don't control it. It just happens. Right. I used to do something where it was really odd and almost transcendental, but it was whenever I was in a stressful situation, I'd actually project myself above myself and look down at the situation and laugh at the situation rather than be in the situation. You know what I mean? It's actually kind of an interesting technique. And it just sort of worked for me. It's almost like a disassociation, but then seeing it for what it really is. I know that sounds very deep. We started very deep, haven't we?
But you started that too with, you can almost use it as a coping mechanism. And so as you talk about, you look down upon yourself and stuff of that nature, it's, maybe just how, each of it, like you said, you aren't telling your brain to focus on that. Your brain is just focusing on that. Now you're trying to figure out how to deal with it. And so I think we all, have different thoughts that run across our mind, and some create us stress and anxiety, and we all have different ways of coping with it. And that might be yours, and it seems to work for you.
Yeah, that's true. And I just think it's partly, my brain works at 100 miles an hour. I'm sure most creative people feel this too. It never stops. It never turns off. And my challenge is controlling it and focusing it. right? So, quite often, like if I'm in a public situation, if I'm in a situation, I want to say something provocative. I want to say something that's going to get a reaction, just because I like playing with the format, even in a conversation, which is
Right.
not, it's just not that normal. But like if I'm in a situation where just a social situation, like a dinner party or something, I don't want to be at the end of the table talking about Bitcoin. I like the guy who comes over and says, "Hey, you guys talking about my monkey?" Like, which has actually happened to me, and I gravitate towards those people more.
Right.
I am interested in the Bitcoin stuff, but I kind of I'm more fascinated with like just talking about weird things.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And we're going to talk about your lighter side on some of the books that you created here in a couple of moments. Steve, I know you know that our podcast is called The Growth Fire. And, you've talked about, a little bit of the class clown, but you studied hard. You've talked about you went to university and were really into creative, but found yourself in the advertising school and into more copywriting. As you're starting to share some of your story of growth. But can you tell us a little bit more about, where advertising school took you? You were in the UK, now you're in New York City. Can you share a little bit more about your journey of growth post-college?
Yeah, definitely. I came out of college in '96, and back then, I was I'd say in Manchester, and a lot of people would like to gravitate towards London, where the big agencies were. And I partnered with a friend of mine from college. His name is Jim Lobley. He's running a successful advertising agency in Sheffield now. He's the founder, which is great. So, but what happened was we just sort of like back in those days, it was the classic copywriter, art director partnership. You go to an agency, you would try and sell yourself. And, we were arrogant. We just finished college. We thought, we could take on the world. Right. And then there was a huge wake up call because, your portfolio that you take out of college is nowhere near good enough to go into the workspace.
Right.
It's a question of, meeting with people at agencies, getting feedback, going away, doing more campaigns, more ideas of your own volition. It's all spec work, and going back in. We found it was useful if there's an agency you wanted to work at, see what clients they have, and then do ideas based on those clients. And so you're really tailored to, to show that you can think differently to what they're doing. And we did that, and that took a long time. I mean, It took us over a year, and it was very humbling. And it was a really great growth moment because you realize, how much do you really want it, right? Right. You still have to be able to, pay the rent, right?
Right.
I was doing a lot of jobs, that were kind of just temp jobs, and you never know where you were going to be next and what you were going to do, and that was amazing to me because there was so much learning there.
Yes.
All these different jobs, which even better as a writer and as a creative, all those moments all add to what you become, right?
Right.
So, all those real world experiences, which I loved, and met all these people from different backgrounds. When I finally did get a job in advertising, we got hired by a company, an agency, a small hot shop agency in Manchester at the time called Cheetham Bell. It was run by Andy Cheetham and Dave Bell. And they were great. They just won the Umbro account. And we walked in and they said, "You guys like football, right? Soccer, right?" So I was like, "Yeah, of course we do." And my friend Jim is really into it. And so we started doing loads of ads for Umbro. So it was like a dream brief, but we weren't getting paid anything. It was like enough to pay for your bus fare.
Right.
And we started working there. And the more work we did, and we put in hours and hours, like we would do pitch work with them where we would be up till 2 a.m. and then we'd still be expected back in at 9 o'clock the next day and really put our time in. I think we got high quite a few times on the smell of spray mount, which is probably like so carcinogenic.
Right.
Not allowed now,
Right.
So we did tons and tons of work, and that was good because that work ethic that they drummed into us as well really set us up for the future.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think just to that point, you've talked about coming out of school, there wasn't a dream cushy job for you right away. You had to do a lot of, you were scrapping like, and I think we see just even in today's world, I don't know from your perspective, but I I still don't see an easy path for graduates to get the dream job. And I think part of the message of some growth is if you want the dream job, you've got to scrap, and it's not going to just be handed to you on a platter. It's very competitive leaving school, and there's a lot of interest, but not a lot of opportunity. And how do you get that opportunity? It sounds like you work hard and differentiate yourself is kind of what some of the message I'm getting of what you did.
Yeah, I recently worked with Mark Moran over at Portland University with his students, and they did a brief. I said a brief for them, and then they came back with the work, and the work was incredible, and it was very inspiring for me to see that. But what was weird was they were so much more advanced at this stage of their journey than I was at that stage, and
Yes.
Obviously we know that's because the internet was just happening when I was at their age.
Right.
But it's the tools they have and the ability, but that puts a different pressure too, because now they're expected to create the work. It's not like in the old days, you used to draw boxes for, this is what I think a TV commercial could be. Now they're expected to actually create that commercial. There's no excuse not to go and do it.
Yes.
And present it. Yeah. So they're under like a different type of pressure. They're under pressure because it's all like, when all boats rise with the tide, right? It's the same.
Right.
They're all coming out of college, but they're competing with each other, and they're all just as smart as each other with these tools, with these creative expectations of when they show their portfolio. It's just it's the same as what we had, but it's just in comparison. When I look at their work, it's very impressive. So
yeah, and I think you're right too. I think, like I said, all boats rise with the tide, and just what the product coming out of school is more elevated as each generation goes through the process, but the competition's still there as well. And so, I think companies are expecting more and universities are delivering more, but there's still a humongous amount of competition. And so the pressures, there is no easy street to get to where you want to get to. It just takes a lot of hard work.
Well, yeah. And also, I mean, I know this is about growth, right?
Yes.
And I think what's amazing is when we were coming out, we were literally like, Jim and I walked into the agency and they said, okay, are you a writer or are you the art director? And we just looked at each other because neither of us had ever had that conversation. And I thought, well, I am a better writer than him. And I was thinking, and he's thinking, I am a better art director than him. So we just picked.
Right.
Just random. But then we totally like focused on that. And then as we, over the years, as we worked together over the years, it was really obvious that we made the right decision.
Yes.
Plus, writers got to go home a little earlier because the art directors had to do all those layouts, right? So I definitely lucked out there. But him and I, like, just being pigeonholed like that is interesting, and that doesn't happen anymore. So now everyone's expected to be so multidisciplinarian, like we are as well. Even now, as I grow in my career, we are expected to do way more than wear many hats, and we describe it as a Swiss Army knife.
Yes,
we all have to do that now, and but a lot of these young people coming out of college, they're already trained that way. They're already thinking that way because they have so many opportunities through the tech that they have available now. So. Yeah. And that's a good thing to see, it's great that, that because come out and go, no, I only do one thing is just
right.
In
very
life,
limiting.
Career.
Yep. So Steve, you've been working at Kenneth Cole for more than 20 years now, and you get to work directly with Kenneth Cole. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about, that working relationship, and then maybe also how it's evolved over the last 20 years?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, when I first came to this company, I mean, it was Kenneth Cole, right? And I was young and I was in awe of him. And, I used to have meetings with him and I'd listen. And then over time, as your relationship develops, you end up realizing that you're more useful to someone like him if you're more honest and open. Yes. And I've found that we have great conversations, and the rule is as long as you're respectful and you care about the work, and you always have a valid point to make, it does work, and it does help because Kenneth is a very open person, and what I like about it is he loves writing, right? Mm-hmm. And him and I together in a room, I think other people get annoyed with us.
Yes.
Because we wordsmith things to death. He has a real mischievous side, which I do too. And I think we on that point. We work best when we do work together. We work best when it's just the two of us in the room, because you can sense other people getting impatient.
Yeah. Right.
Like, why are you guys arguing about an ellipsis versus a colon versus a period? I mean, that sort of thing. And but yeah, and he has a genuine love of the written word. And so, the campaign started way before my time. And a lot of the statements were Kenneth Cole. So it was generally his voice. So, that's something you have to protect. That's something he wants to protect. So, you gotta understand that you can't just go off and do something that you think is right. You have to, on the bigger campaigns where his voice is out there and that's him, then I always made sure that he had input and that he was, or sometimes was the inception of the idea. It doesn't matter where it comes from. We both sit together and we do it all together. And I think that's what I've always enjoyed. And yeah, we've built a good relationship over the years, and a shortcut way of speaking sometimes. And yeah, but what I've noticed as well, and making making me think about this is interesting, is that we always, in terms of process, we always start with what we want to say in its simplest form, right? So what is it we want to say? What is the agenda? And then what is the brief technically? And then it's then how can you twist that? And Kenneth loves the mischievous kind of twists.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. When marriage equality was approved in New York before it went national, we ran a billboard and it just said, gay people getting married, ? Next, they'll be allowed to vote and pay taxes. So you can see that there's like an acerbity there. There's like a little like wink and a nod, but
absolutely.
But it has a power to it.
Yes, it does.
And I think, in terms of the actual voice, the copy and the process, what's interesting is when the brand started, it could be very provocative. It wasn't trying to be provocative. It was just talking about provocative issues.
Yes.
And it was running in like, traditional media, right? So it'd run in the New York Post, they'd run an ad, or they'd do the billboard. We became famous for the billboard on the West Side here in Manhattan. And what's interesting is that the voice was perceived as provocative just because no one else was doing it like that. Mm-hmm. But now with the internet and now with the, provocation has been democratized to the point of it's very hard to break through. And when you're representing many stakeholders in the business, you do want to still push the envelope. You still have to be responsible. But what you're doing is you're competing in the digital space with a lot of people who don't have stakeholders, who only have themselves. They may be comedians. It may be, someone who has a startup company who just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. And
sure.
It's hard to compete in terms of being able to stand out for your voice these days. But we keep trying. We keep doing it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, I mean, you had to run scores and scores and scores of campaigns over your career. I'm going to put you on the hot seat here for a second. Can you tell us about maybe what one of your best ad campaigns was, but then the follow-up to that is going to be what one of the worst ones was, and maybe what the learning lessons from both might have been?
Sure. And just remember, this is only my opinion, right?
Yes, it's only your opinion.
Some other people may have it the other way around.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, when I was never a fashion guy. And, what brought me to work for Kenneth Cole was the voice, right? Because being a writer, I was fascinated by what the brand was doing and the people before me was doing. There's a creative director here who partnered with Kenneth for a long time called Leslie Kolk, and they were doing great things. So yeah, they brought me over, and then, but then it was a little, it was weird for me transitioning into fashion because I would say, but what's the concept? And they'd be like, it's blue, the color blue. I was like, what? And I was more from a few more layers deeper in terms of conceptual thinking. But, what was good about this brand is that we did start to get there. They were already doing that type of stuff. And I, when you use normal models, right? When I say normal models, I mean, stereotypical models, people you expect, to have that aspirational look and feel. What I loved about this company was they were always pushing for diversity. And what we did is we really leaned into that in 2008 for a campaign, which for our 25th anniversary, which was this idea of 25 years of non-uniform thinking. But, that line wasn't enough for us. So what we did is we came up with this concept of we all walk in different shoes. And it was around the idea of celebrating diversity and recognizing people out there whose lives, they were kind of rewriting the script for, who they were. And they were facing many challenges, but they were still championing their causes or even themselves, within those challenges. And so we did this great campaign, and it was a very emotional shoot for me because, all of a sudden you're interviewing these people and you're really getting into their stories, and it was just very humbling,
Yes.
And so I loved that campaign, and we ran that for a few seasons. And then what that campaign did later on in 2015, it evolved into a campaign known as what we called the Courageous Class. And we had many conversations about using the word class, right? Because people don't like to be classed as something. They don't like to,
Sure.
The class system is not a good thing. So, but, we realized that adding the word courageous sort of helped us with that. So we decided to go for it. And what was interesting about that campaign, is focusing on these very inspirational people. Again, a lot of them had faced huge challenges in their lives. A lot of them just wanted to make change in the world. Woke up one day and decided enough was enough, and it was great, and again, humbling. What was interesting about that campaign is at some points, I think it was great as a branding campaign. I just found that at some points, it was hard because you wanted to sort of like relate to people. And I don't think people really saw themselves as courageous. It's not something people describe themselves as.
Right.
We were describing people as that. But, for the consumer to relate to that campaign, it was more of a putting these people on a pedestal too much that I don't think worked that well in our favor. I think it was a great campaign, but I think from the consumer standpoint, it wasn't something they could relate to. And I think, what we've noticed over the years is that, especially the way advertising is today and marketing in general is, you can't have a monologue, you have to have the dialogue. And,
Right.
We're leaning more into that. But from a failure standpoint, we did this one campaign one time, and what we did is we split the website in half, right? So, there are two elements to our brand, right? There's the fashion and the style, and then there's the social impact. And where we do it well is when we infuse two together. But what we did is we separate the site into what you stand in and what you stand for. And we separate the two. It was physical separation on the site.
Yes.
And, this is like, before social media was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, people were going into the what you stand for. And, we had quite a few very polarizing issues being discussed in there. It was like gun reform, women's rights, abortion right, and the right to choose, I should say.
Sure.
And wow, it was crazy. So what happened was all the haters jumped in there and just went for it, and no one was going to the fashion side. So, it was it just became this like huge sounding board of hate. Not then from, when you set up these discussions, the haters are always more vocal than the
right.
In this,
the passion ones, yeah.
And, people who like what you do are not as compelled to write a compliment or to support you. It's only the haters who get very organized very fast.
Yes.
So, and that's something you have to live with when you're a polarizing brand and you choose to talk about these types of issues. Then, you've got to expect both sides, which is fine. As long as you stick to what you believe and you can justify it to yourself and, to your audience, then you're in a good position. Because what we find as people sometimes say that we're political as a company, and we also, we're not political. We just talk about social issues that we care about. And what happens is they often get politicized. So when those issues get politicized, that's not up to us. That's just something that happens.
Sure.
I think a good example of that was, when marriage equality was first was a hot button issue back it was 2004, in the election 2004. we were one of the first fashion companies, if not companies, to do advertising supporting, and it was called same-sex marriage back then, right? And then it evolved to marriage equality. But what was interesting was, it wasn't a thing. It was, and then it got politicized. It got put as a, all the politicians started to talk about it, and there we were talking about it from the standpoint of just equality,
right,
and human rights, and it got completely politicized. So then us running those ads, then we look like we're a political organization.
Right.
So yeah, and that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but dividing the two things, splitting the site, it was a fail on our part. It was a success in terms of dialogue, but in terms of people shopping product or even wanting to look at product, it went the wrong way.
But I think there's so much to learn from that too, Steve. I think there's a saying that came out long before social media, but if someone has a good experience, they tell one person, but if someone has a bad experience, they tell 10. And so, we've talked about that for many years before social media. But as we, maybe get vocal on particular topics, so that the haters get organized quickly, it's kind of that 10-to-1 ratio. We talked about, like, you had a good restaurant experience, you might tell one person, but you had a bad one, you tell 10 people. It does seem like the haters get organized way faster than the ralliers do. Yeah. And they come with more passion and more conviction. And it just, when we're going to choose to get active in these things, we've got to be prepared for the fact that stay true to the passion of your cause, and just be aware that what you're trying to share your opinion, your view, or to educate, the haters may come way faster than those passionate to rally behind you, and just be prepared for that. That's headwinds ahead of you that I think most face, and they're not prepared for that. And that's an experience many of them go through.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, when you pick polarizing issues that you care about like that, if you're going to ride the wave, you got to get on the board, right? So you got to expect it. But what's interesting is we're now focusing a lot on mental health, is one of our primary focuses. And what's interesting about that is that a lot of the work we've done for that it's not as polarizing at all. And I think what's interesting is, for us, we've been experiencing more of a less hate actually, and more of people coming together around mental health, because the World Health Organization pointed out that 1 in 4 people will suffer from some type of mental condition at some point in their lives. So what we said is, the fact that if it's 1 in 4, then the chances are you're going to know someone, whether it's a colleague, a friend, a family member. So, and you'll be affected by that too. So technically, 4 in 4 will be affected by a mental health condition at some point in their life. So, that's powerful. So, it is all encompassing. So when you put it out there, we've noticed that we've got a lot more support on that side. We have, through the Mental Health Coalition, there are so many super smart experts over there that we don't do anything without consulting them, because even just choices of language that you use that may be in your vernacular, just every day that you've got to be careful with. And then just down to things that are what triggers there are, right? Yeah. So, just because you're not triggered by something doesn't mean like other people aren't triggered by it. So you've got to be careful with how you put that out there as well. So, but the team over there at the Mental Health Coalition are growing dramatically, and it's just fantastic to see what they're doing. And one of the biggest needs around for mental health was literally was resources. And what the Mental Health Coalition are doing is they're starting to provide resources. And a lot of people who are suffering, who don't even realize they're suffering, they're now helping people find their mental health journey, because everybody's is different, right? So you can't give someone advice on their mental health. You have to steer them in the right direction, and then hopefully they find the right help that they need. And so what we try and do is make sure that we guide them to the right place, and then their journey begins. But yeah, it's such a sensitive topic. And, I've been in a room with so many experts from so many different fields within the mental health community that you realize how little you know, and how you should just sit and listen and learn. So
and I'm going to use that. So I'm not sure if this is where this comes from you or not, but you said, like many creatives, my brain never stops, never stops, never relaxes. You've written 2 humor books. Is that sort of, you were talking about that earlier as kind of being somewhere where you go to maybe help yourself get some balance. What's fueled the passion for the humor side, and what motivates you to do it, and what do you get out of it?
Yeah, it was interesting. I never planned to do it. What happened was I used to, for us to write The Voice, you have to write hundreds of lines to get a good one, right? And that's, I always say that quantity creates quality, right? So, you write. And I had all these ideas that were great in my mind. You judge your own work, right?
Right.
I had all these ideas that I liked, but I knew they weren't right for the brand. So I just started to create a document of these to decide. It wasn't nothing I put effort into. And then I had friends of mine, these very talented designers called the Hayes brothers, and I told them about this, and they designed a typeface for me. And I started to do it as a blog on Tumblr, and I called it Just Dicking About. And reason being, if someone didn't like what I said, hey, I'm just dicking about, right?
Right.
So it was I was already defensive from the get-go.
Right.
Which says more about me than the work. And so, so going into that angle, and then the blog started to do very well. I got up to 145,000 followers. And so I thought, you know what, why don't I do it as a book? And, my friends helped me with the design. In the end, they set me free because it's such a lot of work, and I didn't want to put any pressure on them. And when I wanted to make stupid little changes, I didn't
right.
And so I just taught myself how to do it in InDesign. And I ended up doing all of that myself using the structure that they'd given me. And yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it. I found I did all this in my spare time. It was kind of how I relaxed, right? So Here was all the work I was doing for us. But then at night or at weekends, I was suddenly playing with something else. And also something else that you own. When you work for a brand, and I think this happens with a lot of people these days, I've noticed that a lot of people do a lot of work for their day jobs, but then they also do a lot of work for themselves. And I think the work that you do for yourself is very beneficial because it actually fuels a lot of your creativity and a lot of input you then put back into your day job. So it's not seen as like a distraction. Right. It should always be seen as something where it's more strings to your bow, but you can always, if I'm working on my humor side and I come up with a great idea, sometimes what I'll do is I go, you know what? No, this is even better for Kenneth Cole. So I take it over to that side. So they definitely scratch each other's back in that way.
Complement each other well.
Yeah. And also, I just found that, the more sort of different types of writing that I do, the better I get. So whether it's short form, medium form, or long form, and I recommend that to every writer out there, is to make sure you do every form you can. I wrote a screenplay recently. I also did a sitcom pilot. These are all things I've had in my head that I just start doing. And if you do a little bit a day, all of a sudden you have it. If you see it as a huge momentous step and you try and do it all at once, you'll never get it done. You have to see it.
Right. Yeah.
Incremental.
Steve, 2 more questions for you. Have you ever had a mentor or mentors in your career? Who were they and what did you learn from them?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I think what's interesting is, I've had many mentors, but I've never seen them as like one person, right? So I've learned a ton from Kenneth, right? I've learned a ton from lots of people. And, even now I always like meeting new people. And what I do is I mentally farm everything from them. I cherry pick everything, those little nuggets that they say. And I almost create, it's almost like that movie. I'm going to date myself now, but like that weird science movie, right? Where they created Kelly LeBrock, right?
Right.
But I kind of do that with mentors, because you can create the perfect mentor if you just pull everything in, from many people. I mean, we just had a new president start at our company. Well, he's not that new. He's been here 8-9 months, but he was 10 years at Foot Locker, right? CMO at Foot Locker. And so his name's Jed Berger. And I've been learning so much from him because he's come in, he has a lot of passion and drive and just the way he works, getting everybody out of each other's way, saying, go, just do it, just go, and that's been refreshing. And also just learning the ethos that he's learned and all that stuff has been very interesting for me. And it's been a breath of fresh air. When you've been somewhere for a long time, when you have someone with a big personality come in like that, it is good. It is good to listen and learn. And then, pushback's good too. It's good to have that dialogue, because I found that, in this sort of like creation of this perfect mentor, on the comedy side, I've been fortunate enough to where you do more writing, if you put yourself out there, you actually people gravitate towards you as much as you gravitate towards them. And I've been fortunate enough to work with Scott Dickers, who's the founder of The Onion, who was a total hero of mine, and I've learned so much. Seeing the passion, seeing how much work these people actually do, how hard comedy is, and how people write and write and write and then rewrite, and the rewrites and the willingness to put your work out there and to take criticism and then to tweak it and change it.
Right.
It's fascinating to me. And so, I have a friend I've met, his name's Kent Jones. And he was a writer on a Daily Show with Jon Stewart for 5 years. And he started on the radio with Mark Maron and worked for Rachel Maddow for 10 years as a writer. And the depth of knowledge he has, and he's so generous with his time with me, and I cherry pick all of everything I'm learning from him. So if you put all those things together, like Kenneth, Jed, Scott, Kent, and then all the other people that you come across in your daily life, maybe you have an account guy who's like a total badass in the boardroom, and just the way he presents, the way he moves around the room, like body language is something you can learn.
Yeah.
What I do is I just piece it all together, and I try and grab everything I can, and then and go from there. So you end up with the perfect mentor in your head, but whether you can live up to that, I'm sure I'm letting that perfect mentor down. Okay.
But I love the answer. It's a collection of some great attributes of different people that you surround yourself around, and you put all those together as to kind of like one mental image of what that mentor would be, and then see how you can learn and emulate some of those great characteristics. And so many people who are on the Growth Fire podcast, I think I've never heard it explained that particular way, but I think that's what they're trying to explain. It just takes a creative brain like yours and a storytelling brain like yours to be able to put it into that kind of perspective. But it makes sense.
The other thing that's great is that, when you work with someone like Kenneth, right, he is in a position where he gets to meet very smart, insightful people out there in the world who are doing amazing things. And then, he learns from them and they learn from him.
Sure.
But when he comes back and then from those meetings and we're talking about something, when he shares what he's learned and shares that wisdom, and he's very generous with us on that, now we're benefiting from all those people, right? So it's always been great that, when great people surround themselves by great people, then it all is a knock-on effect. And so we all benefit from that. So as long as people are willing to share, the next stage down, and then it's up to me to share with my team what I've learned, right?
Exactly.
But I think the other thing that's interesting here when it comes to the idea of mentorship, mentorship is basically guidance and inspiration, right? If you really boil it down. The other thing here that I've been learning is, especially as the world's been changing so fast and the marketing world's been changing so fast, that all these people that you hire that are young people, that are digital natives, as you were, coming up through the ranks, I have learned so much from them, and I learn every day. So even though I still have a lot to teach my team from a conceptual standpoint, or from how to think differently, how to think laterally, all these techniques, they teach me so much about like how the consumer is consuming these days, why things have to be shorter, why a lot of this media, a lot of these ads that we create are so disposable now. So when back in the day, we used to spend so much time and attention on it because you imagine so many people seeing it when the media buy was big. But the way social media is consumed now, and the way they teach us because they're over it, Like I'll show them something and they'll be like, yeah, it's too slow, or, it's too wordy, and they want to cut it down. They want it to be fast. And so I'm learning a lot from them. So the mentorship thing, when you see it from a 360 angle,
Yes.
That has really helped me as well. And even working with those students in Portland, seeing how they think and how they cut through all the sort of clutter
Yes.
to get the focus of the idea, and just so quickly. And I think it's all based on how we consume and this disposable art form that we call advertising.
It's certainly gone to a lot of quantity and the quality. We used to be spending so much time on the quality, and the shelf life of a deliverable today is the exact opposite of what it once was. And so, I think
it's a waste of time, because it's a scroll, right? We say, what is a thumb stopper? If you can stop someone scrolling just for a second, then you've won. But spend all your time and energy and they just whip past it with a thumb.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, thank you so much. We've been talking with Steve Wyatt from Kenneth Cole. Steve, if anyone wants to connect with you after they hear this podcast or watch this podcast, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I think from a business and marketing perspective, you can contact me at swyatt@kennethcole.com. Or if you want to talk things comedy, or you want me to help, if you're a writer and you want me to help you, I have a useful bibliography I can share with you. I have, I do read a lot. I know it's hard to tell on this podcast, but I have. You can contact me through anything for that on Steve Wyatt at gmail.com, and so it'll help me separate the two and know what you're reaching out to me for. But yeah, I can help you. I can steer you to any writing resources, or just have a general chat to you about creative writing and see if I can help you, and hopefully you'll be able to help me in the process.
Steve, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Growth Fire podcast. We really appreciate your time, your insights, your generosity to share with others. And thank you so much. We wish you success on your ongoing journey.
No, thank you for having me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Growth Fire podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.